Now, although dry today, as is the law of Murphy, when we want water it's not there. Today a little bit drier, these routes, but the performance queue of routes and combination of wet weather and wet conditions start to overlap and cause people issues. On their own, routes can be threatening to some riders, but certainly once they're wet, the perception is that they're definitely going to be slippery and really hard to find grip on. True that they're going to be harder to find grip on, but it's not impossible to find grip by any means. And a lot of that comes down to your commitment in the section. Once again, we can see where people have been bullied by these routes into the low spot over there, and give this a couple of weeks and this whole section will be a complete bog. We really want to try and stay high up and stay on the high line and take on these routes with more commitment. The key here is to make sure that when the push comes, when the stall of the bike as it engages with some of these routes doesn't push me up and forward onto the bars, because if it does, it's going to make it much harder for the front wheel to come up and over them, and they're going to start to be affected perhaps by the camber a little bit more. So as I enter this section, I'm going to look up and through, carry a little bit of speed, but I'm going to really push through these routes as I engage, just dropping heels and wrists a little bit more to accelerate the bike, to stop the bike stalling at all and keep my forward momentum good. If I carry some good momentum up and over here, I can pick a good high line through these routes, not get bullied onto the boggy line, which will be boggy soon, even if it isn't today, and we'll get a much smoother run through. Again, we can see how over the years the trail has creeped, become a bit more of a scar on the landscape rather than a nice tight little bit of single track. That's all part and parcel of the organic nature of trails in a natural environment, but I don't want to contribute to that, and I don't want to take the extra time of going down around there, particularly not when it's full of mud. I want to take a nice higher line. Even if these routes are a little bit wet, remember slippery is to a certain extent a state of mind. If you think slippery, hold your breath, tighten up and death grip your bike. It's going to wash out from under you far more freely. We've set our tyres up nice and freshly, we've taken a little bit of air out, there's plenty of grip there, and the other thing I can start to use on this camber is a little bit of hip twist, which we've looked at before. So if I get my outside foot down as I come through here, or even if I don't, I can start to twist my hips up the slope, so if the bike does start to slide, when I've lent it in, I can actually catch that slide, push in harder and find some grip. Now there's an old adage of speed being your friend, and no, I think that's partly true. You've got to get to know your friends before you like them, and if you don't like it, then it's not your friend, is it? But what we can remember here is a little bit of momentum and to accelerate through the section. So if I'm braking as I come in too heavily and slowing down in the section, the routes are likely to have more of an effect on me. The big other factor is performance cue waiting. We're waiting for something to happen when we see routes. We're waiting for the bike to get pushed from under us. We're almost anticipating the fact it's going to slide. Let's take a slightly more positive outlook of what we can affect in terms of where we point our body, where we point our head, our entry speed and our commitment to the section, and we should be able to fly through here without too much bother. Wet or dry, these routes will not push me offline if I take some preventative actions in my riding style. So I'm going to load my outside foot and lean the bike in, twist my hips and keep my head up, and we're going to stick onto these routes, wet or dry. So clearly Mother Nature hasn't exactly respected our editorial deadlines and deluged us with rain to give us some really true autumnal conditions, but you will find as the seasons change and more rain occurs, the trail is going to be punctuated by softer spots where the trail has broken down, water's collected or is drying out and has left us with either puddles or mud. Now obviously as your wheels hit those, that's going to slow the bike down quite dramatically. So we've got a couple of options here. First one really is to make sure that we accelerate the bike through this. Well, the first one would in this case would be to go around it. But let's take it as read that we can't do that and it's a bit further into the season and this is a complete mud fest. If it's a long section, there's no chance of you carrying all your speed all the way through, you're going to have to pedal. When it comes to pedaling through softer stuff where traction is less available, what we've got to really work on is making sure we get a slightly higher cadence, less torque on the chain and we don't lose our grip. But if we're freewheeling through and carrying some speed, what we really want to do is make sure the front wheel doesn't get heavy and bed in, pushing us out of the pocket and heavily onto the front wheel where it can start to be pushed out sideways rather than going forwards. So what we can use is a little manual technique. Now I don't need to be able to hold my manual from the trees over there and roll through on the back wheel. I just need to pop my front wheel up, clear the worst of it, or at least until the back wheel's engaged and slowing down as well. And by pushing through the bike to create my manual, I'll be just rear of centre line. So as the bike slows down, my mass pushes through the bike and accelerates it a bit, rather than the bike slowing and me getting pushed forward to the bars and bar humping, or worse still, washing out. So just remember, it's always about the push and the drive through the feet and hands, rather than any pulling. Intuitively, some of you might, or instinctively, some of you might choose to pull up. But if you pull up, you might get your wheel in the air, but when it comes down, you're coming down on top of it and it's going to bed down into that mud. So what we need to do is just work that little manual just to push through, drive the heels and wrists down, keep the head up and keep the upper body formed so the shoulders go back with the hips, clear the front wheel. As the back wheel engages, the bike's going to slow down and I can sink deeper into the pocket to avoid getting pushed. So as I approach, I'm going to be looking up and through, level my cranks, drop my heels, drive, sink into the pocket and absorb the push as the bike slows down, so I don't end up over the front of the bike, but I end up nicely centered on the bike and ready to carry on down the trail.